You're listening to Inside Alicyn's Wonderland with Alicyn Packard. Inside Alicyn's Wonderland is part of the Tech Jives Network and is produced by Chris Pope of SocialStarsWeb.com.
My name is Candace, and I'm following the white rabbit.
You're listening to Inside Alicyn's Wonderland, the podcast that goes through the looking glass and down the rabbit hole into the wild and wonderful world of animation.
Flip their head!
Pretty awesome. You created a cartoon.
Yes.
So that was something bucket list check. I mean, kudos to you. High five. Pretty awesome. And the show's hilarious.
Thank you.
It's really
We
funny.
try.
Yeah, and succeed. Excellent work. So, now I was doing a little, internet snooping on you.
Uh-oh.
And, so your background's actually in theater.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah, grew up doing theater, went to an arts conservatory for college, Shakespeare in Oxford, all that kind of stuff.
Dude, that's like serious theater.
Yeah. Which kind of leads directly to Bupkiss, so it's like that, why are you putting so much effort into something where anyone off the street can get the job if they got the right agent and the right amount of luck?
Well, there are plenty of jobs in acting. You could work at a museum, reenacting scenes from the past. You could work as a costumed character and wear one of those heads.
I mean, you could, but then you'd also have to deal with the drinking problem that comes with that.
Right. The drinking problem that comes with creating a show is far better.
Right. Oh, it is. I mean, because at least, it's at the very least you can afford better booze.
Yeah. High five. So, now, before you created this show, did you work in animation?
No. I mean, I was always I doodled a lot in class and wrote profane comic strips and whatnot. But actually, this show was originally intended as a live action, a hard R, Eastbound and Down style. Kind of because it was one of those things where I had done the whole theater thing. I came out here, was doing some theater out here as well, and then indie films that never got released, and it was very clear that I wasn't going to be on that just start getting job after job, and it would snowroll. No one was walking down the street like you. I'm going to put you in pictures, So it was like, if I'm really going to make this happen, I looks like I'm going to have to create something for myself. So the show was actually originally just straight egotistical, like I'm creating my own acting job. So it worked out half and half. I did get some acting jobs on the show, but Curtis took my job.
Oh, so you originally intended that you are the Dan.
Yeah. But to be fair, once and also once it was the voice an animated show, I was like, oh well, background in acting, this will be a cinch. I'd never done any voiceover work, and immediately realized the error of my ways. I'd never felt so green as a performer before. I was like, this is a completely different style. It's good for all of us that I was able to just sort of practice and learn on these smaller roles.
Yeah.
Because it was like starting over.
Challenging, isn't it?
Yeah.
In a world. Give me your best in a world.
In a world.
Oh, that was good.
You got to stretch it out a little bit.
In a world.
In a land. A Jerry Bruckheimer film.
In the land before time, not a Jerry Bruckheimer film.
Right. I do get to use that voice on the show as my recurring character is Elisa's boss, the spy boss.
Oh.
Just try and just put it at the bottom of the register and just deadpan it.
That's fun.
Yeah.
So when you were, did you partner with someone when you were writing the show?
Actually, the way it became an animated show is I had the idea and had kind of done a little bit of work on it, and then it sat for a year or two.
And by a little bit of work, do you mean you had a full pilot script? You had
I had sort of a character outline. I had a general idea of what I wanted the series to be, and I had written bits. I hadn't written a full script, but it was, there was the opening teaser and had jokes and things I wanted to put in, but nothing really happened with it, and it just kind of sat around while I was looking for the next thing to do. And then Chris, my co-creator, Chris Pearson, he called me up at one point and he was saying that Adult Swim was looking for new shows. Could that Dan Versus show be a cartoon? And at that point I was like, buddy, if we can sell it, it could be a puppet show for all I care. I'm like, this romantic poverty is getting less and less romantic as the years roll by.
An artist.
Yeah. Once the 20s start kind of coming to a close, you're like, yeah, the romance is gone. I need a check.
I need to pay off those loans.
Yeah. It's like either this or move to Vermont and make candles.
Also a valid career choice.
Right? I mean,
Vermont
as long as you've got a good distributor.
Burt's Bees! Yo! So you started with that, and Chris came to you and said, let's try and put this get animated.
We were like, so we threw together a show Bible, grabbed some of my old doodles as sort of kind of temporary art.
No way!
Yeah, and then put together a couple of spec scripts. I think they were about 15, 16 pages apiece that eventually became New Mexico and Wolfman.
So that's where it started.
Yeah. But even then we were still writing it, it was definitely not a kid's show at that point.
Yeah, I was thinking about that. Even now, though it's a kid's show, I feel like you have a much broader audience than that. Yeah, I mean,
I think by the time we were actually, had gotten picked up and were writing it, we were kind of looking around the room going like, so this is for Stone College kids, right?
But no, it's on the hub.
Right.
It's not for Stone College kids.
Bit of a square peg in a round hole, but given the kind of stuff they have on the air, it's been pretty, amazing that we, even got the shot. And a lot of that is because of Margaret Loesch, who was, she's the head of the hub. She also, basically, if you watched cartoons in the 80s, 90s, and beyond, she ran Marvel. She created Fox Kids, all the, the Animaniacs, all that stuff. So she's pretty deep within the world, and she... Actually, we had we finally got optioned by the Hatchery, which was sort of, I think they were a division of Mandel and American Greetings. And it was basically Margaret and Dan Angel, who's one of our executive producers. So she's actually been with the show since before the hub existed, since before, she spent a year with us while we were in development at Cartoon Network with the show. But, wow. Basically, once we got optioned by the Hatchery, we then got the now defunct One Red Room to do up some art for us.
They did the character designs for you guys?
The original ones, not the ones that were used on the show. Mm-hmm. And then we basically went around pitching. And we were still pitching at stuff like Comedy Central and whatnot. But once we landed at Cartoon Network, and we were there for a year, sort of back and forth about what the show was going to be and what they wanted and versus what we wanted. And obviously that didn't work out, but through that process, the show got aged down. Yeah. And then Margaret was like, hey, they're just putting me at the head of this new network. Do you guys want to come with me? And we were like, yes, let's do that.
That's an amazing story.
Yeah. So there was definitely a lot of hard work, but at least for us, luck did play. We got lucky with the people who brought us around. We got lucky, even once we were there, we got lucky with our staff. Like we got Rob Long in to do our show running first season, Cheers and Frasier. Our entire staff are, people like Brian Sheasley's won too many awards for any shelf to put on. And we, even the cast, like our regular roving guys are people like Tom Kenny and John DiMaggio and Gray Delisle. Like, we're just, we're like, okay, this is our first show, and Dave Foley walks into audition. It was just like, that's Dave Foley. Do we even have to audition anyone else?
I mean, because everybody wants to do animation now, right?
Yeah.
It's fun.
That was actually what was really crazy in the audition process. If you want to meet just about anyone you've ever seen on television, hold a professional audition. You're just showing up and you're like, Balky, what's going on?
Wow.
Yeah. And I actually still feel bad for a lot of the really talented women who auditioned for Elise, because Pageant's audition came in late. While we were already deep into the callback phase, and it was kind of a rushed audition, but I had seen the specials and Andy Richter Controls the Universe, and I was like, she's got some of the best comic timing I've ever seen. Yeah. Let's just cast her. Sorry, Tara Strong, you were amazing.
Wow. That's interesting look into that process.
Yeah. And Curtis, obviously stood out from the beginning as just sort of
embodying that character.
Yeah. And Dave Foley's Dave Foley. Like he basically can show up and just kind of read, and he's still funnier than most people around.
So what was the process like when you started pitching? I mean, how did you even know what to do?
Well, when we first, basically, it all was very sort of loosely done. There, again, a lot of work and a lot of luck, because we had the show and we had the pitch, and then our manager, it was Chris's manager, who then I sort of got grandfathered into because he was going to be selling it for me as well. Uh-huh. And he knew one guy in animation who was Sean Gorman over at American Greetings. And he took us to the hatchery, and they optioned us, and then they basically kind of guided us through the whole process.
Wow. Did you use your acting skills?
I think I was more like, it was less acting skills and more just like, can I bullshit my way through this and like see if I...
And apparently, yes.
Yeah.
You can. Were you nervous?
I mean, yeah, to an extent, but we were really prepared, and apparently it's pretty standard now, but at the time when we were pitching, we had spec scripts, and people were like, nobody comes in with scripts, and, I
because then they want you to rewrite it.
Yeah.
But still.
But not to toot my own horn, or our own horn, but I think they were really strong scripts, and yeah, and so there was really, with... And, showbiz, you got enough people telling you something's awesome that's going to sink in, and you're going to start to maybe believe it, even though you've got like, it can't be that good. It's show business. But then so you start believing in the strength of these scripts, and everyone's saying, that's why you're in here. It's because the concept is easy to grasp, and we really like these scripts. And so there was a little bit of nerves just in, I've never done this before, and these people are professional working people, and I still like, I'm an adult, but I still feel like that, the kid in the corner is just, am I supposed to be here? But I think we had done enough of our homework that we were really confident in the material. We were just going, it's not if they don't buy the show, it's because they don't get it. It's not because the show's bad. Like we had a lot of faith in what we were selling.
It's not personal.
Yeah. And we had done homework. Like we had this huge list of potential things for Dan to go against, and made it a point to be like, they can point to any one of those things, and we can like be like, okay, this is what happens, and this is what happens, and this is what happens.
Oh, did you have like a little wheel, and they could be like,
I wish in retrospect.
Well,
that would be fantastic. But yeah, and invariably they'd always try and trip us up, and I can't remember what the plot line was because this was one of Chris's, but it was Dan versus the poems of William Carlos Williams. And so we had a lot of random stuff like that, and they'd always go for, they'd be like, well, I know what he'd do against clowns, but, what is he going to do against the Bavarian Illuminati?
So had you written before?
As a hobbyist, comedy, a lot of bad plays, some okay one acts.
Yeah.
A lot of, I've wrote a lot of comic strips that are inappropriate for newspapers.
Are they online or anything anywhere?
I don't think so. I have scanned a bunch of them into the computer, so it's possible.
That would be fun, or you could like tweet them out.
Right.
Be fun. I bet people would like to see that.
Yeah, I'm still trying to figure out what the legal process will be once we can finally, because I've got about a cachet of over 40 deleted scenes that I know the fans would love to see, and so far I'm not allowed to post them, and I'm hoping one day I'm like, at the very least. But then again, half of these deleted scenes are the animators and the artists and the editors blowing off steam and having characters do even more inappropriate things than they would normally be doing.
DVDs, deleted scenes. It'd be so fun. So I know you guys are on hiatus right now, but what's your regular day when you're in production like? Let's just make it clear to everybody. So you're executive producer on the show, co-creator, a voice on the show, a writer on the show.
Technically co-executive producer.
Sorry, co-executive producer.
So step down from executive producer.
And executive producer.
But I still get CC'd on all the important emails.
Yes. So, I mean, you're wearing a lot of different hats.
Yes.
You got your Danny little fingers and all the pudding in this show. So, what's your average day like?
Well, it's, when we're in production, there's it definitely switches up. I mean, when we're in production, it's become like a conveyor belt. You know, before the season starts, there's making sure the team's together. There's making sure with the ideas they're together for, you know, sort of pitchable ideas. And then it's basically the process becomes you pitch ideas to the network and they say yay or nay. And then you submit the outline and they say yay or nay and you fix that. And then the script. But by the time we're in production, it's actually, you know, for the first couple episodes, you've got time. But by the time you're in production, it's basically, we got okayed on this outline. Write this script because we're table reading it next week, and then we punch it, and the week after we're almost by the middle of the season, we're basically table reads are basically rough drafts.
That's so cool. You guys do table reads.
Yeah, and then the next week it's roomed for a day and then it's recorded. But you know, it really depends. Like there's some days where you'll be able to in and out really quick, and other days where it goes long. And I think a lot of executives have seemed to it's a popular idea that the work is better if, you know, the writers stay late and they're working way too many hours. But it's like that happens sometimes. But if you've got it by 6, you've got it by 6.
Yeah, 6 is late for a lot of people.
Right. Well,
6.
you know, I actually moved from the Valley to the West Side, and almost immediately that's when the show went. So now my commute is going from about the West LA Santa Monica border to out by the Burbank Airport.
Yeah.
So for me, I was just like, listen, either we finish by 3 or we're going till after 7. So.
And it's your choice, guys. So hurry up at night.
Well, but actually, for the first season, they were like, because Chris is now a 2-time new father, and he had his daughter when we were in the first season, and so he'd be like, "Well, guys, I'm ending this at 6 because I want my child to know who I am."
Yeah, well, that's good. You need to have a well-balanced life.
And I was like, where are your priorities?
Were you really like that?
I jokingly, but I also meant it.
You asshole.
Yeah.
It's like this whole show was made about you.
Yeah, it's like, doesn't she have a mom? Why do you have to be there the whole time?
Ooh, ouch.
Shockingly, I'm not terribly kid-centric for a children's show writer.
I think that you have to have them before they make sense, because otherwise you're just like, seriously, guys?
Yeah.
I mean, really?
I think I'd like to skip directly to the grandparent phase.
Yeah, right?
And just be like, let's have fun this afternoon now. Go bother your parents.
Here's a ton of sugar.
Yeah.
Okay, here we go.
Right. Here's a movie your mom doesn't want you to see.
Let me tell you a story about your father when he was little.
Yeah, that would be great. Talking crap about my kids to their kid.
Yeah.
But then I'd have to go through the whole having kids and raising them, and that just seems like such a slog.
Can you adopt adults?
I think you can, but you probably have to be wealthy, otherwise it looks weird. And then there are wards, I think.
Awards?
Yeah, like like Bruce Wayne and Robin is his ward.
Oh yes, that's what you need. You need a ward.
Yeah, except you can't.
You have to be really wealthy.
Yeah, and these days, like there's too much in the news. I refuse to be alone with any child ever. You can't pin anything on me. I was not even in the same room.
And I do not drive a van.
Right.
Do you drive a van?
No, I drive an Acura.
Thank you. Thank you for that. If you did drive a van, then I would feel a little bad.
Right. Yeah, it's one of those extra long, big, supersized vans with the windows blacked out. And free ice cream written hastily on the side.
In blood.
Yeah.
So now, how does the process of writing a script take place? Are you guys all, like, does one person write it? You guys
yeah, well, it's changed over the years because the first season, Chris and I wrote a lot together and then started writing separately. And also a couple of the younger writers, Eric and Kirill, who...
How old are they?
I think they were 25 when we started, so they're anywhere between 27 and 30 now. I'm not really sure.
Wow, young!
Yeah. So they're making more money than all of us right now.
Go then.
Yeah, but they definitely write as a team. But yeah, it would come that, we'd sort of, it started off more, everyone would just sort of come in with ideas and we'd be pitching them. And then if your idea was pitched, you'd go off and write the,
episode.
Write it by yourself, and then you'd bring it to the room and
punch it up.
Yeah. So
that's cool. So you guys do get in there though all together for the punch up.
Yeah. It's It can get loud and testy, but it can also be some of the funniest. So dying from laughter.
Is there beer involved?
Not during, but no. I mean,
After.
yeah, we've gone for drinks once or twice, but like Eric and Kirill, they're cool young guys. They've got cool young things to do, and Chris has a wife and kids, so it's usually me just drinking alone in the dark.
Well,
Yeah, it could be worse. I mean, I do have cable now.
Oh, hey. So then do you own like the other Dan Engel?
Dan Angel?
Angel,
yeah.
Sorry. What you guys have like? Does he also think it's his show? I mean,
well, yeah. I mean, he's a lifer in the biz as well. Like he and his partner Billy, they also do the Haunting Hour, and they've done all of the R.L. Stine stuff, the Goosebumps and all that, and they've done a bunch of TV shows and movies. But yeah, he's basically. Once we really were in full pitch mode, he was sort of coming around. He's kind of shepherded the show for a good number of years, so he's got a lot invested in it as far as personal, professional.
Why didn't you hire just people named Dan to work on the show?
I argued that at the beginning, but it didn't really fly.
Man, I mean, there's so many talented people in this town.
Yeah.
We think we could have found 50 or so named Dan.
Right? Well, and when we actually started, I can't remember exactly, but there were like to the point where in the beginning there were a bunch of Dans and Chris's all in the staff. There may have been one or two at One Red Room. I don't remember.
But is Chris willing to change his name to Dan?
I doubt it at this point.
Yeah.
Besides, Chris is his middle name.
What's his real name?
William. So I like to call him. So it's William Christopher Pearson, but I like to joke it's the sort of high lowbrow joke that his initials are WC, and it's like that's very funny to the English.
Oh, the water closet.
Yeah.
It's interesting too. Ashton Kutcher just announced that.
Is he changing his name to Dan?
His first name is not Ashton.
Oh.
I think it's Dan. Actually, I don't think it's Dan. I forget what it is. But he just announced on that MTV award show that Ashton is his middle name. So he was talking about authenticity.
Oh, yeah. Did he give out his real name?
He did. I just forget. I think it was Chris, actually.
Really?
I think it was. I'll have to Google it. But
maybe then that's two people in that cast who had the name Chris and decided to be something different, because then there's Topher. That's not a name. That's short for Christopher. It's got to be, right?
Right. You know what? I didn't even think about that. I just thought, what creative parents?
Yeah.
Or British. Sounds British to me.
Yeah, yeah.
WC.
I'm wondering. I think it's too late to have a stage name.
You kind of might be working against yourself unless you want to go in a completely different...
Right. I mean, I could write erotica under a pseudonym, maybe. Get in that 50 Shades of Grey money.
What would your stage name be?
Oh, it's funny. I used to have some, and then I'd look it up, and I'd be like, oh, that's somebody's actual name.
So then you have to be like theirs, like with the SAG, like one after it, or
right. It was or variations. Like for a while, I was going by Carlos Goldberg, but then I saw Cannibal the Musical, which was very funny, and Trey Parker used his pseudonym for the director. There was a variation on that theme, the Latin first name and the Jewish last name. It wasn't exactly the same, but I was like, oh well, there goes my bit.
At least your bit was replicated by
right.
someone very funny.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like basically a pat on the back.
Right. But I think Carlos Danger wins out at this point.
Carlos Danger.
Yeah. Wiener's online handle.
Yeah. That was something else, really. Don't read those texts too early in the morning, I gotta say.
Nobody texts me like that. Well, I've got a TV show. Come on.
Hint, hint, audience members. Yeah. Dan is on Twitter. So.
It's true, and I almost never tweet, and that's how you know it's me.
Yeah, exactly. Church of Dan, at Church of Dan.
Yeah.
So, now the casting process. I saw Dawn Hershey worked on
Yes,
the show.
yeah, she was great. And she,
Dawn Hershey.
Oh yeah, and she had, obviously she has a large cachet of people, and you'd look at the list and you'd be like, Robert Downey Jr.'s not coming in, is he? She's like, probably not. But yeah, so she,
Well, if he MP3s though, that's still
right?
pretty cool.
Yeah, so she, she got all of her regulars and all the name people, and I spent several evenings like diligently listening to every single one. And
how many auditions did you get?
Oh, geez.
How many for each role, approximately?
Less than 100.
Oh,
but I mean that I actually was saying.
Yeah, right. From her for initial call.
Yeah. I don't know how many exactly, but yeah, it may have been more, may have been less. It feels like it was a lot. I still hear some of them in my head, and you're going through, and you're just like, and it'd be interesting because a lot of them were just straight voice actors, and not even like at the sort of fame level that a lot of our roving cast was, and so. They had the unfortunate kind of place to really have to sell themselves just based on their talent, because listen, I'm not going to lie, I got a little starstruck when you're seeing all these names come through, and you're like, these people are like
in my show,
my silly little trifle of an obscure cartoon show. DB Sweeney's coming in. Oh, how exciting! I love the cutting edge.
Yeah, totally. I mean, and it makes sense, I mean, and if something is really killer, of course you're going to bring someone in, right? How many people did you bring in for each role?
Oh, like actually from the...
Did you do that for callbacks?
Yeah. We brought... a lot of people came in for, for the callbacks. I mean, probably around 30 or so per role.
Per role? Wow.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
Yeah, and again, I do feel bad for, like, once Chris Rock did that bit, all the named stars were like, that's right, I can show up in my PJs and make a few $100 for 10 minutes of work.
Yep.
And
yeah.
Yeah, and so like you'd be like, I want to give these people a chance, and they'd be like, well, I mean, you can have Ernie Hudson, and you're like, yeah, I'll have Ernie Hudson.
So did you find, like, would you do like a full day of casting, or did you break it up over a couple days? Yeah,
I mean, it was definitely, and for some roles there were more callbacks. Like, even though I know Chris and I were basically sold on Dave Foley from the beginning, so I think he had to come in several times, and to the point where we were just like, why are we putting everyone through this? Like, why are we putting Nate Cordry through this? He's fantastic, but we're clearly giving it to Foley.
Why were you putting everybody through that? Was it not your choice?
No, I mean, I think that was just part of the process, and also it wasn't just us. The studio had to be like it. The network had to vet it. So
you get clearer and clearer.
Yeah.
To come to the conclusion. Did you have people read together to do any chemistry tests?
Yeah, we did actually, and some interesting stuff came in later. Like there would be, I don't know how kosher it is to name names, but like Jerry Traynor came in towards the end of our callback and just sort of was hilarious with the reading. So it was just sort of like, hey, can you come back tomorrow and read with some of these people? So so by the final, I think the second or third round of callbacks, we were having people read off of each other, and I'm wondering if, like, the Elise took there were more, I would say there maybe were more callbacks for that, because there was I mean, there were a lot of great people who auditioned for all of it, but Curtis stood out to the point where, like, when Jerry Traynor came in, we were like, oh, there might actually be someone else. And obviously, at least for Chris and I, it was basically, well, if we're Team Foley. I mean, Kids in the Hall, News Radio nerds, and like, so. But with the female actresses, like, we, most of them, we weren't familiar with a lot of their work, but they were pros. They were fantastic. People like Tara Strong and Grey Delisle, people who are just amazing at what they do. And then I got suckered by a celebrity who I knew could really deliver the goods. I had no idea she was on Criminal Minds. They were like, the girl from Criminal Minds. I was like, no, the girl from The Specials. And Andy Richter Controls the Universe, who's got amazing comic timing. That's
funny. But also proof that, if you're a good actor, you can work in drama, comedy, animation,
Yeah. And I know I guess she had done some other voice work before that, which I didn't even know that she had done a stint on Friends. That's where Chris knew her from.
Oh, yeah. I saw that on IMDb. Yeah, I didn't know that either. But, like, a number of episodes.
As of right now, we've done 53.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say she was on Friends for a number of episodes.
Yeah.
But you've done 53 episodes. Why not 52? Isn't that the normal
well, I think
11-minute 26s?
No, well, actually, we had 3 seasons. We actually have the so far we have the original Arrested Development trail, 22, 18, 13.
Interesting.
I don't know how much I can go into how that all.
You know what? That's fine. We've got plenty of other things to talk about. Creative Arts Emmy.
Yeah, that was pretty exciting.
Dude, you guys won a Creative Arts Emmy.
Yeah, the directors, and they've got
the directors.
I don't know. I still don't know if it's one statue that they all have to share, or if everybody gets their own.
I think they get their own, but you guys have a number of directors on this show. I saw Matt Danner actually.
He was our first season supervising producer director. Helped design the look of the show, and he was a lot of fun to work with. And then when I guess he went over to, he got a gig at Disney, maybe something that paid better. So you can't fault the guy for that. And then Brian Sheasley, who had been with us from the beginning, at least of the film Roman process, he was one of the first 2 directors that we had hired. He and Bill Kopp, and Sheasley's basically. He's industry gold, so it was just like, it was almost a no-brainer. It's like, well, I guess he just moves it right and smoothly moves into place, and it worked out really well.
So does each director have a different thing that they focus on your show?
No, I mean it's more it's really more a luck of the draw thing, where it's okay, here's a number of episodes. Okay, you get 1, you get 2, you get 3, you get 4, you get, and so. I mean, there's obviously difference in styles, and the animatics are really interesting to watch for me, because a lot of I've seen animatics for other shows, and a lot of them are consistently on model, the character, so it just looks like the character you'd see in the show, only with the pencil outlines, where for us, they were close to model, but every artist had their own style. So it got to a point where you could be like, oh, this is his section and that's her section. And you'd start to, it was almost like a voice actor's work. You're like, oh, well, that's obviously this guy's scene. And you'd be like, oh, okay, I know who this is.
Wow.
And you'd start to expect and like you'd sort of temper what you were looking for to that specific artist, going like, I don't like when he does this, but I love when he does that. And even in the show, when it comes out, there were some like Ashley Lenz, who was one of the winning directors, who was one of our the artists on the first season, and then for the second season he was moved up to director. But as an artist, he draws so many panels that it almost, like, his animatics look almost animated. So anytime like his came through, you knew exactly what the scene was going to look like, because it was basically moving like it would have been fully animated.
Show off.
Canadians
taking our jobs. No. So then, okay, so all these different hats that you wear, does it ever get overwhelming or tiring?
I mean, I'd say the only kind of like tiring or overwhelming part of it is that obviously when the show was created, it's personal. The characters are loosely based on us, so you there's a lot of you feel a lot of sort of. You take it way too seriously, and you're up at night, you're agonizing over stuff that really doesn't matter at all.
Yeah.
Because you're like, this is. I'd say it's like when people ask, what's your advice on creating a show? I was like, don't make the first one really personal, because you're gonna have to learn that it's it's a collaborative process, and also it's, unless you're building a network, you've got a good amount of creative control, but there's the people, the people above you are above you, and at the end of the day, what they say goes.
Yeah.
So, just, it'd be good to know that process and know going in what you're getting into, as opposed to going, like, seeing shows and that are, creator-driven shows like South Park or Family Guy and stuff, and you walk in there going like, oh, well, they obviously love the stuff. They're just going to give us the reins and let us go wild. It's like, no, they're not. You're going to have to learn your place.
Interesting. Yeah, well, I mean, you've certainly, come a long way from having no show.
Yeah.
And, because a lot
doing
of times...
theater in Los Angeles. What a career jump.
What place did you do?
I did I've tended to do mainly original shows, though I did do Merchant of Venice and the show didn't get great reviews, but I got pretty good reviews, so that's good enough for me. But I was mainly, it was like I'd hook up with theaters and not really join them, but kind of perform with them, and they'd be like, if you want to do another show, you should join the theater. And I'm like, I've already paid to act in school. I'm never ever paying to act ever again. Boy. Like, I'll do it if I really like it and I like the process. I'll do it for free, but I'm not going to give you money to let me act.
Please take my money, because nobody else wants to take actors' money in this.
Right. Yeah. So I did for a few years. I did a bunch of shows at the Met Theater in Hollywood, and I've done some stage readings around town. I did a few shows over at the Eclectic in North Hollywood, and mainly the 99-seater, sort of no money kind of.
Did you do any musical theater?
I've done musical-esque theater, but I'm not a huge musicals guy. Like I like Trey Parker's musicals.
Oh yeah.
I like the George Hearn, Angela Lansbury, Sweeney Todd, and not a ton much else.
So do you feel like, in any way, sort of having multiple skills and talents has, obviously it's worked for you. We've seen how that's worked out. But do you ever feel sometimes like it's worked against you? The reason why I ask this question is because a lot of times people insist that you focus on one thing. You are obviously a multifaceted, talented person. Has that ever come up for you?
I mean, it's only in the sense where you're, obviously my background is acting, and that's, if you were to ask, pick one, like, obviously I'd love to be able to make a living performing, and but I do love writing and I love coming up with stuff, but working on the show has also given me a whole different perspective on acting, because when you're an actor and you've been doing it that long, you get very self-serious about the craft and about the importance of what you're doing and the work and all that. And when you're on, and in voice work, when you're on the other side of the glass, you're basically just say the lines like you're supposed to say the lines and dance when I tell you to, monkey. And, it becomes almost like you start kind of thinking about it differently, where before you're like, mine is the most important job on the show,
it's an art,
it's really like the least amount of work for the most amount of credit. It's the hardest part about acting is getting a job.
Right. We look for a new job every day.
Yeah, or attempting to do voice work professionally without ever having done it before. Then that's also not super
Back
easy.
away from the mic, Dan.
Yeah.
Dan, you're popping your peas, Dan.
I listened to like the early audition back, and I was like, holy shit, can we burn this?
At least they gave you some. At least you were able to get some.
Yeah, and I feel like I definitely improved over the years.
Did you study or did you take?
I wanted to, but I didn't. I still intend to.
Yeah.
But I also have this. At this point, like I had been, for the first half of my life, all I wanted to do was just be done with school forever.
Oh yeah.
And so the idea of going back to any kind of classroom, it's almost like the sunlight to a vampire. It's like you get close to the door and you're like, I can't go into the church.
The church. Yeah. Church of Dan, that's your moniker.
Yes.
Why is that?
Because it's a sort of it's both a combination of my egotism and my mockery of my own egotism. Like, I'm well aware of my faults, and so I try to openly make fun of them, to make them like the spoonful of sugar to make it go down a little bit easier.
Right. Well, I think
I
Isn't
have
that
another.
everybody's
Yeah.
fault?
I mean, for a
Actually, not
while, I tried to, and plus it was lighter because before that it was Bleak and Joyless Existence. It was the,
That was your moniker?
yeah, well, that was the email. It was Bleak and Joyless Existence at yahoo.com.
At AOL.com.
Yeah. But it had to be at Yahoo because that completes the joke.
At Yahoo!
Yeah.
Aww.
Which I actually lifted from a Pete Sickman Garner comic book.
The Bleak and Meaningful...
Bleak and...
It's really hard to say, isn't
Bleak
it?
and Joyless... what is,
and Joyless Existence.
yeah, I think that's about what it was, yeah. But actually, it's... Speaking of comic books, if it weren't for obscure comic book artist and cartoon writer Evan Dorkin, this show probably would have never... Like, the idea of placing myself as the main character would have never come up, because I was a comic book geek for a while as a adolescent, and then kind of got away from the superhero comics and started getting into the indie kind of like Milk and Cheese and Dork and Johnny the Homicidal Maniac and all that kind of stuff. And Evan Dorkin would, he had a ton of strips where it was kind of autobiographical, but it was like self-mocking and it was funny. And I was like, and before that...
Like Garfield, right?
Yeah. But before that, I'd start to, when I doodle in class, I'd have different characters. And from like 16 or 17 on, I was the main character in most of my doodles.
Wow.
You know, the one starting with like, "Are you there, God? It's me, Dan."
Beat, frame,
Yeah.
nothing happens.
Well, actually, it's usually like, "Don't bother me, I'm in the tub."
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
So you grew up in Virginia.
Yes. Though inside the Beltway, so it's basically the D.C. suburbs more than it's fake
Okay.
Virginia, as they like to call it in one of the last election cycles.
I saw. What's up with that? I don't remember that.
Well, because Northern Virginia has, at least historically, been economically and educationally and politically on a sort. Well, not politically, but it tends like the schools are better. The people make more money because most of them are from D.C. There are a lot of diplomats, and then once you get further south, it starts getting a little rednecky. But it's actually changed a lot because the like right around Dulles Airport, there's basically an East Coast Silicon Valley has come. So now, what used to be, this sort of like
Bleak.
Yeah, well, this kind of just this small kind of suburbs of D.C. has now extended down into places that 10, 20 years ago were very rednecky and are now have like artisanal soap shops and art house movie theaters and
Sushi.
Yeah.
Oh, that's fun.
It's getting a little. I mean, because this was also a state where I remember when I was in college, the governor at the time had done things like banning The Wizard of Oz from school bookshelves because it promoted witchcraft, and so that
Oh my god.
yeah.
Wow.
So it's changed a bit.
So what were like when you were growing up? Were there any cartoons that you loved that you think inspired you?
Well, I'd say the cartoons that I loved as a kid probably had very little to do with Dan Versus because they were more, like Muppet Babies or He-Man or Transformers or G.I. Joe, the standard kind of like kids cartoons. I'd say as far as with Dan Versus, that's probably, that goes more with the influences from stuff like The Simpsons or, to a lesser extent, South Park and all the others. I mean, I love South Park, but, The Simpsons has been basically, like, it's like a member of the family at this point.
Oh, I know. But yeah.
Then again, I guess South Park is probably, like, 15 years old now, too, right?
Oh, well, it was on. Wasn't it on when we were in high school?
I think I'm pretty sure it started around my junior or senior year of college,
Yeah,
but,
I remember
late
it being
90s.
on. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I'm not going to make you tell your age.
It's easy to figure out in this digital day and age.
I know, and hard to get rid of.
Right.
Okay, so, I have one more question.
Plus the hairline and the gray in the beard doesn't help.
Come on, a touch of man will just
Right?
tune
Like
that right up.
one thing I do like is now when you see stuff like Hell on Wheels or True Blood, you've got these big macho guys and they've got the gray in their beard now, and they're like, okay, it's coming in.
Oh,
like
yeah.
Joe Manganiello or Anson Mount, and you're like, all right, gray in the beard, it's working.
Keep it up, guys.
Yeah.
Keep it up. Now, can you just...
because I'm one movie deal away from Bosley, so get all this taken care of.
Are there any other things that we may have seen you in, like commercials or like TV shows or something like that would be like a fun fact?
Well, I did a bunch of little things that never will probably ever be released, just for funding or distribution reasons. But I've done a couple of reenactment shows. Like about 10 years ago, I did one for Lifetime when they had a show called What Would You Do, where it's like you're reenacting. I was reenacting as this electrician who was working in a bank vault, and I got electrocuted and defibrillated. And let's see, I recently actually did an episode of this Discovery ID show called what is it? Unusual Suspects, where it's another reenactment show, only a bit more gruesome. My character was a suicidal rapist.
Oh no!
Well, that was actually a weird one because I was just like,
well, I guess you must feel bad if you're a rapist,
right? What was crazy was I show up and I got the sheet for what I was going to be doing, and apparently I thought he's the red herring suspect. He does a little peeping Tom stuff, and then he gets interviewed by the cops, and they take his DNA, and that's it. And I get there in the first day, and they're like, "Okay, so we're gonna do your suicide scene right now." And I was like, looking through the pages, going like, "Where's it?" Okay, and they hand me this big rubber shotgun, and I have to walk out of the woods and blow my head off. And then I was like, "Okay," so the next day, and I see they've got some guys as cops, and I was like, "Okay, so today they're going to be taking the fingerprints and DNA," and it's like, "No, today this is your wife, and you're going to have good times and then bad times and fighting," and I was like, "Okay." And then the third day, it was at a hotel or something, and I was like, "So today must be the day where we're doing the fingerprinting," and I talked to the cops, and that's it, right? It's like, no, today you're going to be doing your rape scene where you rape your aunt, and I'm like...
Your aunt?
Yeah. And you know how they say, like, hey, try this, you'll like it, and then you try it, and you're like, oh, I can't believe I lived my whole life without ever doing this. Not at all true with rape scenes.
Phew.
Yeah. Just one of those, like, going like, I could probably live my whole life and not do another rape scene.
Dan Mandel, not that into rape scenes.
Yeah. It's not as much fun as they make it look on TV.
Wow. Question took a turn for the dark side. Okay, final question. What advice do you have for any kind of, whether it's an animator, whether it's a writer, whether it's an actor, someone who wants to produce their own content for television?
Well, first of all, I think it's similar to what if you've been an actor for years, it's the one thing they sort of pound into your head at any school is if you can be happy doing absolutely anything else with your life, make that a backup plan because if you can do something, then there's no reason you should go through all of the frustration and heartache and hair loss and sleepless nights and basically it's it's like they've been doing the baseball analogies recently. We're saying that, like, if you comparing acting to being at bat, saying like you don't get a hit every time you go up. In fact, it's the rare occasions that you do get a hit. Or something. I butchered that analogy, but I'd say perseverance is that's really the strongest because eventually most people are going to give up. That's just the fact. I mean, I was a theater major at an art college, and I would say maybe 5% of my graduating class has anything to do with the business, be it theater or TV or film or anything. So. After a few, anybody who says, like, I'm going to move to LA, I'm going to give myself 2 years, and then if it doesn't work out in 2 years, then I'll do something else. And I'm like, then traffic's already bad enough. You're just about to waste 2 years if that's all you're putting in. Like, giving myself 6 months to be a star. It's like, well, stay home because it's not going to happen. Like, every once in a while, there's that one person who, like, gets grabbed out of a crowd. But that's, occasionally people get hit by lightning or bit by a shark or, it's not, occasionally people win $400 million in the lottery. It's not
toxic shock syndrome.
Yeah, it's not the likeliness. So, you're going to have to prepare yourself for a lot of lean times. While you're watching friends buy houses, you're going to be living in a crappy little apartment, while people are, like, starting their adult careers and, like, setting up pension plans, you're going to be rubbing change together for the dollar menu.
Which is delicious.
Yeah, you have to prepare for that, and you just have to be in it for the long haul. I mean, for me, it was a combination of you know, I'm like, there's nothing else I could do, and I'm either going to die homeless or I'm just going to outlast everyone.
But you did do something different than acting. You went on to create a show and become a writer and co-EP. And
it's true. But to be fair, that all was born out of the fact that I was just like, I need to make my own show, and just as a showcase for acting. And
very cool. So you're a proponent of that.
Oh, yeah. I actually, there was one of the panels at Comic-Con this year that we went to where it was the voice acting, where I think it was like mainly the agents. And there was someone asking a question about, like...
Oh, yeah, with Pat Brady.
Yeah. And someone asked the question sort of like negatively talking about how creators are putting themselves in the show. And I was like, well, maybe that's why the show was created, jerk. Like... like, there's no other... Like, they're
go make your own show.
Like, look on IMDb. There are plenty of actors who got work on my show that, you know, I didn't do all the voices, so...
Yeah. And you're well suited for all those voices. Well, cool. Thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Really appreciate it. And thanks, guys, for tuning in to Inside Alicyn's Wonderland.
With their hands!
You're listening to Inside Alicyn's Wonderland with Alicyn Packard. Inside Alicyn's Wonderland is part of the Tech Jives Network and is produced by Chris Pope of SocialStarsWeb.com.